Why do I feel this way? Coping with the changes brought by dementia. This session is aimed at people living with dementia or caring for someone living with dementia. You may be joining today for a number of reasons. Perhaps you're finding yourself reacting to things a little differently than you usually do. Maybe your energy is not quite there. You may be feeling that everything is heightened, or you may feel numb. Today, we're going to explore why you may be feeling the way you are and what you can do to help yourself and those around you cope in the face of the changes brought by dementia. After this session, if you find that you need to talk about anything that we covered further, I strongly encourage you to connect with the First Link Dementia Helpline. You'll find the link to the phone number at the end of this presentation. The following adapted quote has been originally attributed to Thomas S. Monson. You cannot change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. I ask you to take a moment to think about this quote. Dementia is present in your life. You didn't ask for it, neither did your family members, but you are all affected by it in different ways. You may not be able to change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Today, we're going to talk about how you can make those adjustments when the direction of the wind is constantly changing. The dementia journey is full of unknowns. From the moment symptoms start to become more noticeable, those affected by the dementia will become entangled in uncertainty. It begins with the feeling that something is off prior to the diagnosis. After a diagnosis is made, if ever, you may be wondering, what now? What will the future look like for me, for us? The uncertainty continues as you navigate the changes in your social lives, your home, healthcare services, and the constant changes brought by dementia. Not knowing when another loss will come can be draining. You may find yourself looking back on what your old normal was and wondering if you will ever feel a sense of normal again. Acceptance is hard. It does not happen overnight and it is not a final event. You may feel more accepting of a change and our new normal one day, only to be thrown back into sadness, denial, or anger the next. What you can expect is that dementia will present significant changes and challenges. This may be hard to hear and hard to accept. However, by learning strategies to help you cope with the changes and to maintain your quality of life, you will be better able to deal with your changing situation. There are three stages in any transition: the end, the neutral or transition zone, and the new beginning. This is called the psychological state of change. Adjusting to change begins when you experience a loss or an end of something and begin to grieve how things were before the change. For example, you used to visit with your grandchildren every Saturday, but now this looks different. The time when the old is no more, but the new is not yet clear, is called the transition or the neutral zone. This is a bit of a limbo period where you may find yourself unsure of how you feel or overwhelmed and unclear of how best to adjust. This is often a time of confusion, and you may experience grief, anger, denial, fear, and acceptance. However, while the transition phase can be uncomfortable, it is also a time when you can explore your options and make choices that will make accepting your new reality easier. Moving through this transition brings you to a new beginning. This final phase is when you settle into your new reality that has been brought by the change. The length of time it takes to move through this psychological state of change varies. It depends on the environment in which the change is occurring, how you have coped with change in the past, and the nature of the change itself. Human beings have a built in ability to adjust to change and hardship. It is called resilience. We all have this in us to a varying degree. Building resilience takes time and practice. It isn't about making your problems go away. Rather, it's about building skills that can help you to manage stress so you can cope with the change and enjoy your life. You have already begun to work on building resilience by joining us today to learn how you can cope with the change and loss brought by dementia. We'll share some strategies later on about how you can further strengthen your resilience by exploring ways to manage the challenging emotions that are common on the dementia journey. Generally, we adjust more readily to changes in life that are our choice, have a net gain, so more gains than losses, and are final. Think about the things in your life that have changed as a result of dementia. Were they expected? Were they wanted? Assuming the answer to these questions is no, what impact does this have on coming to terms with the situation? Although most people would agree that dementia brings more losses than gains, this does not mean that it is unrelentingly negative. When we learn about the disease and find ways of coping, there can be some wonderful moments of grace along the dementia journey. Take a moment to consider some of the changes that you have experienced as a result of dementia. Is your relationship the same that it was before? Is your lifestyle the same? What does living with dementia look like for you? I'm also going to ask you to think about these two questions. How have you coped with difficult situations in the past? And was your method of coping successful? Living with dementia or supporting someone who is can be taxing and overwhelming at times. It is common to experience a variety of feelings depending on what the day brings. You may feel discouraged, sad, lonely, frustrated, confused, or angry. These feelings are normal. Some feelings arise from being unable to change the situation you're in, while others arise from feeling that there is no end to the many changes you're experiencing or the concerns that you have. Take a moment to think about what is causing you to feel the way that you feel today. Consider how your expectations of yourself and others can affect how you're feeling. For example, do you expect that family members will call more often and they're not? It can be hard to let people know what it is that you're needing. Generally speaking, many people want to help, but help looks different for everyone, and it can be hard to know what it is that you need. If you are not getting the help you need and it is leaving you feeling stressed and resentful, think about how you can help those around you to know what it is you're needing help with. If you are overwhelmed because you feel others expect you to take care of certain responsibilities, such as making all the necessary appointments, be clear about what you're comfortable with and the areas where you need help. All change, negative or positive, involves loss. This may be a loss of identity, your relationship with the person you're caring for or who is caring for you, or a sense of control or comfort. We can look at loss as a type of change or transition when you acknowledge the loss and let go of your old reality and the expectations that will no longer be met so you can focus on the relationship as it is in any given moment. There are four principal aspects of loss. Disengagement is a part of loss that we feel as a result of a change made to a situation that we're used to. For example, moving, a job change, and illness all shake up what our normal feels like. Disidentification is what we feel when we are transitioning from what was to what will be. It describes a change in the way we identify ourselves. For example, I was a retiree or part time accountant. Now I'm a caregiver. Disenchantment is the realization that you have been torn from your old reality that you accepted without thought. For example, you may have had an image of what retirement would look like and now must accept a new reality that is different from the one you had anticipated. Disorientation is the uncertainty that comes from not knowing what is going to happen. The familiar ways in which you structured your time and your day to day lives are gone, and nothing has come forward to replace them yet. You feel like a shipwrecked sailor on a desert island wondering what to do next. Transitioning through change takes time, it does not happen overnight. But if we don't try to work through the change, we risk becoming stuck in a past reality that may no longer be possible to maintain. Accepting the new reality and letting go of the old one does not mean you are immune from the pain of the loss, but it can help you to stop fighting with yourself or the person you're caring for or who is caring for you, resulting in a lower stress level for you both. When we experience a loss, we experience feelings of grief with it. And because the dementia journey brings a marathon of change, living with dementia in our lives brings constant grief in various forms, whether we are aware of it or not. Grief is universal. It is a normal and necessary human response to any loss, both big and small. Grief is uniquely felt by both the person living with dementia and their care partners. For example, you may feel grief when you first hear the diagnosis or when you can no longer remember how to make a recipe that you have been cooking your whole life. Remember that others may be in a different place in their grief process. As dementia progresses, the losses that accompany the constant changes in your life accumulate and can eventually fill up a huge balloon of grief, which can express itself in many, sometimes unexpected ways. These include physically, it may look like low energy, feeling weak or worn out, poor sleep patterns, poor appetite or overeating, physical pain, heaviness in the chest, the list goes on. Psychologically, it could be poor concentration, forgetfulness, sighing. Emotional, it could look like shock, anxiety, crying, depression, anger. Socially, you may start to withdraw from others or find yourself reacting differently or out of character to others in social situations. And finally, spiritually. This could mean avoiding what used to meet a spiritual need in your life, like going for a walk in nature or attending church, or it could mean a greater need to engage in these activities. Dementia often challenges our original perceptions of grief as something that occurs after the passing of someone we care about. As people progress throughout the dementia journey, it's common to experience two types of grief. The first, anticipatory grief, is a reaction to the losses that have not yet occurred but we expect in the future. For example, feeling sad or expressing denial over discussions of eventually needing to give up a driver's license. We know this loss is imminent and will become a new reality, and the thought of this can evoke a grief reaction long before the license is actually surrendered. These anticipated losses, grief reactions, and the need for adaptation are merely part of the daily experience of people affected by dementia. Grief within the dementia experience is often disenfranchised, meaning it is not openly acknowledged, socially supported, or publicly shared as the loss of a pet or a celebrity might be. There still exists stigma with dementia. And while many people living with dementia and others affected by it work hard to combat this stigma, the secrecy of a dementia diagnosis or a lack of understanding as to what a diagnosis means can add to this disenfranchisement or this feeling of being alone in your grief. This is a quote on the slide from a care partner that reads, "I wish someone had told me how alone you can feel, how little understanding others have of this disease." We often hear this from people living with dementia as well. I'd like you to take a minute to think about how these descriptions of grief reflect your experience. Can you relate to feeling grief about the losses you're expecting in the future? Or perhaps feeling like you can't share how you're feeling with others because they won't get it? Take time to reflect on how you may be feeling. I also want to quickly acknowledge that depression can coexist with grief and to be aware of when you're having challenges coping. Depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain. Among those living with dementia, symptoms of depression and anxiety can be a direct result of damage that is occurring in the brain or can be side effects of medication. Up to 40 to 50% of people living with dementia and 15 to 32% of family care partners experience depression at some point along the dementia journey. This comes from the World Alzheimer Report produced by the World Health Organization. It is important to diagnose depression in people living with dementia because depression can make the symptoms of dementia worse. For example, depression can cause increased forgetfulness, confusion, withdrawal, and anxiety. The good news is that the symptoms of depression respond well to medications and counseling or other mental health support, thus lessening the symptoms experienced. Some common signs of depression to be aware of include depressed and sad mood most of the day, every day, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities, lack of energy, problems sleeping, increased confusion, and loss of appetite and weight. For a diagnosis of depression, symptoms must cause significant distress or impairment in a person's daily functioning and occur every day for a period of at least 2 weeks. If you experience most of the above symptoms regularly, speak to your doctor. Untreated, depression usually continues to get worse, but if treated, you may experience relief from the symptoms of depression. Who has felt guilty about something in the past week or the past month? I would wager a bet most of you are nodding your head yes. Whether you are a person living with dementia or supporting someone who is, you will likely find yourself feeling guilty at some point or another along the way. Guilt and grief are close siblings on the dementia journey, and where you find one, you will often find the other. Guilt can be thought of as anger directed at oneself or someone else. It is an emotional warning sign that comes from a belief that one has violated a moral value. Guilt's purpose is to let us know when we've done something wrong, to help us develop a better sense of our behavior and how it affects ourselves and others. It prompts us to re examine our behavior so that we don't end up making the same mistake twice. Ask yourself, is guilt influencing my behavior? Perhaps you feel guilty for losing your temper, for wanting time away or taking time for yourself, for asking for help or feeling negatively towards the other person, for not visiting enough or doing enough, for breaking promises you said you would always keep, or for not spending as much time as you would like in other areas of your life. Does this sound familiar? Feeling guilty is exhausting. It drains you of the mental and physical energy that you need to cope with the symptoms of dementia or to care for someone who is. So, how do you manage it? Trying to ignore your emotions will only make it harder to deal with the change that gave rise to them in the first place. The antidote to coping with feelings of guilt and grief includes a rational examination of what actually have I done wrong, and then being more self compassionate. Feelings of grief in particular often get mistaken for other things. I feel so guilty when I'm out enjoying myself might actually be I feel so sad that we are no longer able to participate in this enjoyable activity together, rather than an expression of having done something wrong. So, what you think is guilt is actually grief in disguise. To process our losses in a healthy and healing way, we need to understand the grief process. This involves acknowledging and naming the emotions you are experiencing. Are you feeling guilty, angry, jealous, sad, in denial? Give it a name. These are all normal reactions in grief. Even if we don't name the losses in our life, we often have a grief response to them. So much anguish is caused by denial of our feelings or circumstances. This wastes time and energy and usually makes things harder than they need to be. When we allow ourselves to accept what we're feeling, relief and change become possible. Keep in mind that the level of awareness of these losses will change as the dementia progresses due to changes in the brain that affect thinking skills. Think about how your grief may be affecting your behavior. If feelings of grief are repressed rather than responded to, then they will continue to manifest in ways that may create additional challenges, such as anger at a family member, frustration with a healthcare provider, exhaustion, depression, guilt, and pain or illness. Naming a loss as grief appropriately can help you to cope with some of the changes in behavior in yourself and the person you're caring for or who is caring for you. It may also help you to break down the barriers that prevent you from taking care of yourself, such as I don't have time, or help costs money, or no one can do it like I can. It may be that when you look for it, there is the time and money, but these strong emotions are preventing your brain's ability to think logically and to find the solutions. Allow yourself to embrace the loss and feel the grief associated with it. Identify what's causing you to feel guilty. Is it a specific situation you're going through or a thought or feeling that you're having? Why do you think you feel guilty in that situation or when you have those thoughts, feelings? What are your expectations of yourself, of others? What role might your expectations have in the guilt or grief that you're feeling? For example, if the source of your guilt is control or concern over making a mistake, then working to increase your skills by learning more about dementia and ways of coping, such as through education like this, may be helpful for reducing this concern and helping you better manage feelings of guilt. Express what you're feeling. Talk about your grief and acknowledge what is the best grieving style for you. Finding ways to express the loss you're feeling helps to connect your head's logical understanding of the loss with your emotional understanding of it. When you're in the moment of experiencing intense emotions, stop what you're doing. Find a quiet space to limit distractions. Take 4 or 5 slow, deep breaths and try to clear your mind by counting to 10 or singing your favorite song. Find helpful ways of processing how you're feeling. Understand that your grieving process is uniquely yours, and how you experience grief will depend on your personality, your past experience with loss, the impact of the loss, and the length of time and frequency over which the losses are experienced. Think about what restores you. What helps to fill you up or distracts you from your grief? What type of support do you need to let a little air out of your grief balloon? For example, a walk in the park may be restorative, good self care, and a welcome distraction. If, during the walk, I stop at one point and remember the many wonderful walks we used to enjoy, then those thoughts are grief work. Share how you feel with others who understand and won't judge you for your feelings. If you know someone else who has gone or is going through a similar experience, try sharing how you're feeling with them. Avoid isolating yourself. Find ways to stay socially connected with others in your life. This may be talking to someone you trust, write in a journal, join an online support group, paint a picture, go for a walk. Find a safe and productive way to get those feelings out. The intensity of a feeling usually decreases if it can be expressed. Please take some time now to consider some ways that you let some air out of your grief balloon. What do you do for yourself? If right now you are asking yourself, what do I do for myself? And can't think of anything, I encourage you to think of something small that does not take additional time out of your day. It can be as simple as adding a few drops of essential oils to the floor of your shower to create an uplifting scent, making a mundane yet necessary task a rejuvenating experience. Or it could be as simple as sitting down for a cup of tea while your family member rests and leaving the never ending household chores for another day. I cannot underscore the importance of this enough. Remember to be kind to yourself. If you notice negative thoughts running through your mind, give yourself some reassuring words. Something short and simple, such as, I'm having a hard time today. We all have bad days, can help calm your emotions by offering self compassion. When you catch yourself having unhealthy or negative thoughts, consider what you would say to a loved one or a dear friend in that moment. It takes time, but with practice, we can rewire the brain to think and speak more compassionately with ourselves. Remember, the changes that are occurring are not your fault. You are doing the best you can. It takes a lot of courage to travel the long and difficult dementia journey, and no one comes into this with all of the answers and never making mistakes. There will be mistakes. Sometimes it feels like a lot of mistakes. There will be hard days, and you may lose your temper at some point because it is simply all too much. Take a deep breath. If you're able to, go for a walk or simply leave the room and reset. Keep in mind that everyone's situation is different. Try to avoid comparing yourself to the situations of others and be realistic about your limits and what you can and are willing to do. Know that while some things will never be the same, you will adjust to the losses. Some strategies you can use to help you cope with the change and uncertainty of the dementia experience include: focus on the things you can do, not the things that have become too difficult. Experiment with ways to modify activities. If reading has become too difficult, try audiobooks. If you're no longer able to attend your exercise class, try doing an exercise video together at home. You may have a good laugh over your attempts at some of the moves. If something seems difficult, take a break. This can be as quick as stepping out onto the balcony for a minute or two for some fresh air. Keeping up with the changes of dementia is a very demanding job. Taking time for yourself will help to restore your physical and mental energy to better cope with the changes. Taking a break also provides you with the emotional distance needed to put your feelings into perspective. Keep in mind that changes in the brain can make it difficult for people living with dementia to process change and think through it. Find meaning and purpose in your day. We all need to have a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. This need is as normal as the need for food and shelter. As what you're able to do changes because of dementia, try to find new ways in which you find meaning and purpose. What are some of the things you do in your day that give you a sense of meaning and purpose? This could be make time to do activities you enjoy with positive people. When you feel hopeless, talk to someone about how you feel. Often others can shed a brighter perspective on the situation. This is one of the reasons people join a support group. Establish a sense of extended community by building a support network. Strengthen the bonds with the people who see you through the ups and downs and with whom you can share your hopes and fears. Staying connected to children and grandchildren can give you perspective. Use inspiring photos, posters, and quotes. Hang them around your home. Carry notes with positive affirmations to bolster hope. There are lots of things you can do to help you adjust to your changing abilities. For changes in memory, for example, you can keep to a routine. Have a regular way and time to do things. Some people find it helpful to use a notebook to hold information that is important. Keep it with you at all times. It may contain your address, important phone numbers and names, a list of things to do, appointments, any thoughts or ideas you want to hold on to. Finally, ask for help. For many people, this is much easier said than done. Many people feel uncomfortable reaching out and asking for support or help. You may not want to impose or be concerned about how the task is done. Consider, are these reasons logical or rational? Are they appropriate, especially now given the current situation? You may be surprised how many people are happy to help deliver groceries if this is a challenge for you. Ask someone to bring over a meal, or two, or three, or four, and leave it outside for you to ease the demand of preparing food. Some community organizations, such as the United Way or local seniors organizations, have more formalized supports in place to connect you to others in the community who are willing and able to help. Call 211 to find out what resources are available in your community. I know this has been a lot of information to process, so I want to read a story to you that was written in 1987 by an American author and activist named Emily Pearl Kingsley. The story was written about Emily's experience having a child with a disability and the unexpectedness of it. Slight adaptations have been made to the story to apply it to a person caring for someone living with dementia. The story is a metaphor for the unexpectedness of a diagnosis of dementia and the forced change in perspective that coping with the diagnosis requires. Welcome to Holland. When you're planning for retirement, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may even learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole group of people you would never have met before. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, "Yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned." And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. Life with dementia will continue to bring changes. Even though this can make you feel like there is much you cannot control, it is important to recognize that there is a lot you can do. By learning about dementia and implementing the self care strategies talked about today, you can prepare to manage the changes that will come. I'm going to read this quote. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, "I will try again tomorrow." If you have questions about information you've heard here or any other questions about living with dementia, please don't hesitate to call our First Link Dementia Helpline Monday to Friday between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Before you go, I'd ask you to consider finding a sticky note or other piece of paper and write down two things. One key piece of information or learning that stood out for you today, and what one thing you are going to try to do differently now that you have that information. Place your sticky note somewhere you will see it over the coming days, whether on the fridge, in your purse or wallet, as a reminder of what you learned and how you are going to apply it. If you live with a person with dementia who is not aware of their own disease, you may need to be sensitive to the location you choose. Thank you for joining us here today.